I'm going to try to do is explain to you quickly how to predict and illustrate it with some predictions about what Iran is going to do in the next couple of years. In order to predict effectively, we need to use science. And the reason that we need to use science is because then we can reproduce what we're doing. It's not just wisdom or guesswork. And if we can predict, then we can engineer the future. So if you are concerned to influence energy policy, or you are concerned to influence national security policy, or health policy, or education, science, and a particular branch of science, is a way to do it, not the way we've been doing it, which is seat-of-the-pants wisdom. Now, before I get into how to do it, let me give you a little truth in advertising, because I'm not engaged in the business of magic. There are lots of things that the approach I take can predict, and there are some that it can't. It can predict complex negotiations or situations involving coercion. That is, in essence, everything that has to do with politics, much of what has to do with business. But sorry, if you're looking to speculate in the stock market, I don't predict stock markets. Okay, it's not going up anytime really soon. But I'm not in that, I'm not engaged in doing that. I'm not engaged in predicting random number generators. I actually get phone calls from people who want to know what lottery numbers are going to win. I don't have a clue. I engage in the use of game theory. Game theory is a branch of mathematics. And that means, sorry, that even in the study of politics, math has come into the picture. We can no longer pretend that we just speculate about politics. We need to look at this in a rigorous way. Now, what is game theory about? It assumes that people are looking out for what's good for them. That doesn't seem terribly shocking, although it's controversial for a lot of people that we are self-interested. In order to look out for what's best for them, or what they think is best for them, people have values. They identify what they want, what they don't want, and they have beliefs about what other people want, what other people don't want, how much power other people have, how much those people could get in the way of whatever it is that you want. And they face limitations, constraints. They may be weak. They may be located in the wrong part of the world. They may be Einstein, stuck away farming someplace in a rural village in India, not being noticed, as was the case for Ramanujan for a long time, a great mathematician, but nobody noticed. Now, who is rational? A lot of people are worried about what is rationality about. People aren't really rational. Mother Teresa, she was rational. Terrorists, they're rational. Pretty much everybody is rational. I think there are only two exceptions that I'm aware of. 2-year-olds, they are not rational. They have very fickle preferences. They switch what they think all the time. And schizophrenics are probably not rational. But pretty much everybody else is rational. That is, they're just trying to do what they think is in their own best interest. Now, in order to work out what people are going to do to pursue their interest, we have to think about who has influence in the world. If you're trying to influence corporations to change their behavior with regard to producing pollutants, one approach, common approach, is to exhort them to be better, to explain to them what damage they're doing to the planet. And many of you may have noticed that doesn't have as big an effect as perhaps you would like it to have. But if you show them that it's in their interest, well, then they're responsive. So we have to work out who influences problems. If we're looking at Iran, the President of the United States, we would like to think, may have some influence. Certainly the President in Iran has some influence. But we make a mistake if we just pay attention to the person at the top of the power ladder, because that person doesn't know much about Iran, or about energy policy, or about health care, or about any particular policy. That person surrounds himself or herself with advisors. If we're talking about a national security problem, maybe it's the Secretary of State, maybe it's the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, maybe the Ambassador to the United Nations, or somebody else who they think is going to know more about the particular problem. But let's face it, the Secretary of State doesn't know much about Iran. The Secretary of Defense doesn't know much about Iran. Each of those people, in turn, has advisors who advise them so they can advise the president. There are lots of people shaping decisions. And so if we want to predict correctly, we have to pay attention to everybody who is trying to shape the outcome, not just the people at the pinnacle of the decision-making pyramid. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't do that. And there's a good reason that we don't do that, and there's a good reason that using game theory and computers we can overcome the limitation of just looking at a few people. Imagine a problem with just 5 decision makers. Imagine, for example, that Sally over here wants to know what Harry and Jane and George and Frank are thinking and sends messages to those people. Sally's giving her opinion to them, and they're giving their opinion to Sally. But Sally also wants to know what Harry is saying to these 3 and what they're saying to Harry. And Harry wants to know what each of those people are saying to each other, and so on. And Sally would like to know what Harry thinks those people are saying. That's a complicated problem. That's a lot to know. With 5 decision makers, there are a lot of linkages. 120, as a matter of fact, if you remember your factorials. 5 factorial is 120. Now, you may be surprised to know that smart people can keep 120 things straight in their head. Suppose we double the number of influencers from 5 to 10. Does that mean we've doubled the number of pieces of information we need to know from 120 to 240? No. How about 10 times to 1,200? No. We've increased it to 3.6 million. Nobody can keep that straight in their head. But computers, they can. They don't need coffee breaks. They don't need vacations. They don't need to go to sleep at night. They don't ask for raises either. They can keep this information straight, and that means that we can process the information.